Welcome to the F1Stop show. I am your host, Simone, and with me we have two great guests tonight, Henry Broxton and Wes Spearman. Lads, how are you this evening?
I'm doing good. How
Yeah,
are you
pretty
doing,
good,
Wes?
thanks. Yeah, I'm good. Interesting
I'm good to be
race at the weekend.
yeah, and it's good to be back on the podcast because I think I've got a
When was the
whole
last time?
season without coming. I think it was genuinely the livery ratings, which was right at the
Right at the
start of the
start,
season.
yeah.
I don't
Right,
think I've been on since then, and we've crowned a world champion. So yeah, it's been a while.
right. Round 19, I believe it was. And, well, Japan produced some rainy, rainy, rainy days, if you like. So let's jump into it. As you said, Henry, a new world champion was crowned in Max Verstappen, back-to-back world championships, two-time champion, same as Fernando Alonso. Now, lads, how would you sum up Max Verstappen's season so far from start to finish?
Who wants to go first? This always
Go on,
happens with
Henry.
us two, doesn't it? We can't decide
Go
who
on.
wants to go first. Yeah, completely dominant. Different to last season because it just seemed like he was always going to win it, even from the. I know he didn't win the first race, but it just seemed like he was just so raring to go. I know there was, you know, Leclerc and Ferrari were having problems week in week out. I think that did help a bit, but even with him finishing some of the races, I don't think he would have won them. We might have gone to like maybe the next round after, maybe even a couple of races from the end go to like Sao Paulo or something with, he needs to win to do this to win or whatever. But I think he was always going to win it. There wasn't much doubt in my mind. That the I said this when I was on before that there's a project going on at Red Bull, and it's if you're not a Red Bull fan or a Max fan, it's scary because I think we are in the Max Verstappen era now, and a second, I think it's going to be not going to be his last. Definitely won't be his last. I think there's plenty more to come. So yeah, completely dominant, great car, great driver, and we're in the Max Verstappen era now. Simple as that.
Now, Wes, I'm sure you know Max didn't have the best of starts to the season. I mean, a couple DNFs in Saudi Arabia, I believe Bahrain was one of them as well. Can't remember. But after that, Max Verstappen then said, this was time ago, he said, my title chances have, gone. I can't do anything about it. But I don't know, 18, 19 races later, you're world champion. So what is the mindset of Max Verstappen? Because he seems to just, I don't know, destroy everything that comes his way, if you like.
I mean, yeah, it was, I suppose, in hindsight, quite funny when he said it was only about 5 or 6 rounds into the season when he said, oh, the title's gone, it's going to Ferrari. But I don't think he could have predicted just how much Ferrari ballsed it up, essentially, for a large part of sort of the middle of the season, if you like. And yeah, they had a few issues as well, reliability, what have you, but a few driver errors into that. A couple of mistakes from Leclerc at Imola and France, was it the other one? Paul Ricard. And then yeah, ever since those sort of middle rounds, Verstappen's title lead has just skyrocketed really, and here we are, 4 rounds from the end of the season, and he's a two-time world champion, and as Henry said, he's been completely dominant. I mean, he won this race by 25, 26 seconds.
Didn't you say that before recording this video that he'd win by 20 seconds or more?
I think it was last week. You asked sort of what the margin of victory would be. I think I said 20 seconds, so I wasn't too far off in the end. Yeah, just looking back at his race wins throughout the season, I think I can't remember a single one of them being close at all. I can't remember him sort of having to fight too hard to win, if you like. He's just more often than not led from the first couple of laps and just absolutely bolted, left everyone in his dust, and it wasn't any different this weekend in Suzuka. And I suppose he got a bit of help from his teammate Perez, sort of forcing Leclerc into the mistake at the end, if you like. Leclerc obviously handed the 5-second penalty off the back of that. I'm not sure whether Ferrari are appealing that because it was handed out quite quick. And I think Verstappen was only told that he was world champion by Johnny Herbert in sort of the post-race interviews, which is an interesting way to find out you're world champion. And I think I saw somewhere that in pretty much the top 4 divisions of racing, the world champion has won the championship whilst not in the car or something, whilst not actually on track. So yeah, obviously, Verstappen winning it in sort of Parc Fermé, if you like. I think the F2 winner was racing in sort of Italian F2 or something. Or
Drugovic. Was it Drugovic?
I think so, yeah.
Drugovic crashed out. And then he was watching at the pit wall. Yeah, I remember that. And he won it from the pit wall because Thierry Pourchaire didn't finish as high as he needed to or something.
Yeah, I can't remember who won in F3, but I think in British F4, the winner of that was racing in Italian Formula 4 as well. And W Series, really sad news that they can't finish the last 3 rounds of their series, but Jamie Chadwick, a 3-time world champion, pretty much sitting at home, I'd imagine. So yeah, it's an interesting way to crown a champion, and I just hope for Max's sake next year he can win it in more normal circumstances as opposed to the team he's got now.
The last few seasons we've seen Hamilton cross the line and he's been champion, and they've got like all the montage and things, and Verstappen, well, he had that last season, but it was disputed and people were like, what happened there? What? And then this season he crossed the line, we all thought, oh, it's going to Austin, and he probably win it in Austin or whatever. And mental scenes to be told by Johnny Herbert, and then still not really know, because if you look at the cool-down room, he was like, I'm not world champion. And Perez, because if you listen to the audio right at the start, Perez walks in and goes, world champion, not world champion. He goes, no, I'm not. And then you see Charles Leclerc's face drop as they tell Verstappen to go into the reserved for World Drivers' Championship champion room, and he just couldn't believe it. All 3 of them were, you can see their faces, pictures, absolute pictures of just shock and awe and whatever. So yeah, a weird way. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of the fella, but I do hope that he gets a proper world championship where it's not disputed and he crosses the line and he can celebrate.
We didn't even see Verstappen win the race until he was pretty much at the end of the first corner on TV. Anyway,
yeah.
We didn't.
I think he'd already crossed the line, hadn't he? When they cut to him.
Yeah, he'd already crossed the line. He was going into the first corner because obviously, I suppose, understandably, the focus was on Leclerc and Perez, but we didn't get that iconic Crofty commentary that we had for last year, or Hamilton 7th in 2020. So I wonder what's happening. What's going to happen with Drive to Survive? Whether they'll get Crofty to record sort of a separate piece of audio just to slot in there. But,
you also saw that, because obviously us doing sports journalism, we obviously know how things are cut together, and the montages afterwards, they were like adding Crofty's commentary of just like, because like when Lewis won it, it's like, and Lewis Hamilton's world champion. You've got Crofty saying it as he's on the podium going, and here is Max Verstappen, he's world champion. He saw in the montages, it didn't seem as epic, and it was so funny because it was so like, he was just talking. It wasn't like he was shouting it. So yeah, that was quite funny. If you watch the montages back, it's like he goes, and Max Verstappen crosses the line to win at Suzuka, and that's it. Max Verstappen, world champion, when he's on the podium. So it is quite funny. But yeah, hopefully next season. Well, I hope it's not him next season, but you know what I mean. I hope if he does get another one, I hope it's in good taste or whatever. So,
yeah, I get what you mean. Now, the race itself was, shall we say, a rainy day with red flags, green flags, cars going everywhere. But I think one of the biggest points during that race was, Carlos Sainz, crashing, midway through the first lap. And, the weather like that, it's not always easy racing with intermediate tyres, wet tyres, and it was quite a struggle as well. So could you say that point kind of set off, just put the race in motion, if you like?
Well, it stopped the race, didn't it? I mean, it ended it.
The opposite.
I got up at 5:30 in the morning to watch one racing lap in a 2-hour window. What happened there? It was awful. I mean, any other day I would have been like, cool, let's just chill, grab some whatever. It was literally 6 o'clock in the morning, and we'd only see one race lap, and they were saying it was going to be an hour and a half minimum. So yeah, it was gutting, but yeah, I think we'll come on to the TractorGate or whatever it's called. But yeah, I think that the aquaplaning was just going to happen. I mean, I'm surprised that around the first corner that everyone was okay. I think it was quite an impressive feat that they all got through the first corner pretty much unscathed, and the move that Verstappen did on Leclerc was just incredible, especially in the wet in those conditions while they were on intermediate.
That was jaw dropping.
Amazing! Like that was a championship winning overtake, and it turned out it was a championship winning overtake. But it was a matter of when, not if, at that point. But yeah, I think that Carlos Sainz got the brunt of it. Alex Albon, I think, had a bit of issues, and that led to the biggest controversy of the day, I think. So yeah, if you want to go on to that.
Well, it brings us to our second point because Carlos Sainz in the barriers, and at this point, red flag, and you'd expect, you'd expect marshals, the crew, to come and collect the car. Well, in this case, it wasn't all well said and done because Pierre Gasly plus tractor equals, what should I say, almost near-death experience, if you like. And it wasn't the best situation in how it was handled because, Gasly feared for his life. He was scared, as any driver would be scared. So, Wes, what's your view on that? On how it all transpired, how it went about, and was it right for the tractor to be where it was, and given that there was a marshal there as well?
I mean, it's absolutely horrendous from the FIA that they've allowed that to happen. I mean, when Sainz crashed out, obviously aquaplaning intermediate tyres on a circuit as wet as that, and pretty much the drivers were forced onto Inter because the wet tyres this year are so bad that they're so slow. There's just no point really running them, so they have to be on the Inters. And obviously, as I said, conditions as wet as it was at Suzuka, then there is that element of, or greater element of risk, and it didn't work out for Sainz. And we saw Hamilton and Alonso battling it out, and I think pretty much both of them, and maybe someone else came quite close to hitting Sainz's car, so that could have caused a sort of a multi-car pile-up, if you like. But Gasly, he had to pit at the end of that lap because he got a piece of advertising board stuck on the front of his car. He couldn't see. He had to box for a new front wing and put on some wet tyres. Then obviously brought out the safety car. You had Gasly at the back of the pack, sort of going at not full racing speed, but sort of fast enough, if you like. I think it was over 200 kilometers an hour, which is still pretty quick. And then, for whatever reason, the FIA decided to bring recovery vehicles onto the track to recover Sainz's car, whilst the F1 cars were still on track. And some people say Gasly, he went past it too fast, but he was 9 seconds under the delta time that he had to race to. If he aquaplaned as Carlos Sainz did, then we'd have lost another driver at Suzuka in 8 years. Sorry. The fact that, I mean, it's just, as I said at the start, it's just horrendous, and there's no reason whatsoever for a recovery vehicle to be on track whilst the F1 cars are still out there, albeit not racing. Yes, the race had been at least under safety car, if not red flagged by that point. But the cars are still out there on track. They're still going at 70, 80, 90 kilometers an hour, whatever it be, at the front of the pack. And obviously Gasly, he was allowed to catch the pack up. We're just thankful that he's still alive, quite frankly. And the marshal that was pulling the car out of the wall is still alive as well, because it was only a matter of a couple meters, and a couple meters at that speed in the rain, you can quite easily go from everything's fine, everyone's alive, to could have potentially seen 2 fatalities there.
Henry, what's your view on this, about how this all happened? because F1 Twitter rather, they didn't. It was awful, appalling, if you like.
Yeah, I think we talk about Gasly going past it, but actually, even though they're behind the safety car and going much slower, I think the whole pack went past it while it was on the track. Low visibility being one, the wetness being two, and three. Obviously, they put the blame on Gasly for this, which I think is horrendous. But then again, it's a separate incident. It was going too fast under red conditions, whatever. But it's those three things could have resulted in something 10 times worse than 100 times worse than what actually happened. I mean, I just think, like, going back to obviously Jules Bianchi, rest in peace to him, like, that wasn't even on the track, and look what happened to there. I know we've got better technology in the halo, and trying to make the cars as safe as possible while still being the pinnacle of technology and as fast as possible. And the fact that we could have lost any of the drivers, mainly Pierre, on Sunday, is just you just don't want to think about it. And there's going to be a full investigation on it. I know people are pinning it on Gasly for going too fast, but it's two separate incidents. It's two separate things. I know they happened at the same time, but Gasly going past on the red flag and the tractor being on the track are two separate things. It just happened to collide, and hopefully they did. Luckily, they didn't collide. But it's just horrendous, and it has no point. We might not know what happens with it. We know that the drivers will talk about it. I know that Vettel is the spokesperson for the drivers. I'm sure he'll have something to say about it, and people will have stuff to say about him that he can, talk about. And they've talked to the media. Gasly's talked to the media. Checo, all of them have talked about it in anger and disgust. So something will be done about it, and hopefully it never ever happens again. Never mind a death, just anything on the track that shouldn't be. Especially in those conditions, it was almost a perfect storm, wasn't it?
Now, just one final thing on this subject. Why do you think the FIA has a problem when it comes to making the rules for on-track situations? Because it seems that when you make the rules, 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, they're not followed. Do you get what I mean? They're not followed. Why do you think that is? Because surely if you put rules in place, excuse me, they're supposed to be followed, for safety reasons, to ensure that good, clean racing happens on track. But then again, you don't follow the rules.
I mean, goodness knows what happened in that stewards room for them to decide that then was the right time to bring on a recovery vehicle whilst Gasly was still on the track, and yes, not racing speed, but still you had to catch the back up, because I think at the point he passed the tractor, I think it was still under safety car conditions. The race hadn't been red flagged yet. I think he actually got the penalty. I think it was like a 20-second penalty or something at the end. Was I think later on in the Grand Prix for, I think, turn 14, 15, wherever that is on Suzuka. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I mean, the last year and a bit hasn't looked great on Formula One and the FIA for various reasons. I mean, Spa last year, for example, Abu Dhabi last year, Saudi Arabia last year, Suzuka this year, cost cap, which we'll get onto later. Whether Suzuka was 4 points or half points in the rulings around that to do with red flags and length of time you can race or whatever. Things need to be more airtight, and a lot more airtight. There seems to be a lot of grey areas in the rulings over the last, as I say, year and a bit. F1 and the FIA needs to look at the rule book at the end of this season, or if not now. They've got a week until COTA, so whether they can take a look at things in the interim, I suppose. A lot of work needs to be done to stop. You never want to see a recovery tractor on vehicle whilst cars are still on the track, because as we saw 8 years ago with Jules Bianchi, the tractor was in the gravel putting out a car, and it lost the life of a hugely talented driver. As I say, F1 isn't looking great, or certainly the rule makers aren't at the moment, and hopefully they can rectify that for next year.
Now, excuse me, although there was some, I don't know, harsh, well, not harsh, although there was some bad points, bad areas in Japan, we did get good, to see some good racing in Suzuka, you could say. And in terms of like midfield battles, because you always want good racing. Now, if you're a Mercedes fan, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell probably had an okay weekend in Suzuka, but if you're Lewis Hamilton and you're trying to get past Esteban Ocon, who's in a car that's not so as quick as yours and is defending like a lion, then of course you're going to have difficulties. And well, hats off to Esteban Ocon, because hey, Hamilton is not an easy person to defend against, you get what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it gave me a bit of flashbacks to Hungary in a way. A wet weekend and an Alpine blocking off a Mercedes, and it was weird because obviously last season it was a different spec, and this season obviously the Mercedes just doesn't have the straight line speed. I was like, oh, here we come to the final straight. Like, here comes Hamilton, and Ocon's just faster. How that works, I have no idea. And Ocon, brilliant driver. I've always think he's brilliant. He's not had the chance to, be at one of the big teams, and the fact that he's been, darting around and, well, he's been in the same sort of team, hasn't he? And he's, gone from different ones like Renault and Racing Point or whatever. But it's all been sort of like the same team. I think he's brilliant. Obviously, he's got Alonso who's moving next season, but you'll have Gasly. It's a brilliant team. I think that the Alpine collective, whatever, if they're going to stay Alpine for the next few seasons, or just that team should really push to be that fourth, maybe third team, because they have the chance now that McLaren and other teams have dropped down a bit. I mean, Mercedes for one, they're not as good as they used to be last season. So yeah, I think that Aston Martin were tipped to be quite good. I mean, they were just Racing Point a few seasons ago, and now they've moved on to Aston Martin, and they're just not as good. So yeah, they've really got a part to play in the next few seasons, I think, of being that fourth, maybe third team if they're lucky. And two great drivers who I think have still got a massive future in F1. Two brilliant French drivers, and yeah, I think that it was a brilliant midfield battle, and Ocon had every right to finish in that fourth spot. So yeah, great drive from Esteban. Great guy.
Wes, what are your views on seeing Ocon versus Hamilton? Because that was very exciting.
Yeah,
I'd watch it again if I could.
As Henry said, almost flashbacks to Hungary. Yeah, I mean, what a sort of... It wasn't a mini battle, it was a proper out-and-out battle for fourth place. It was less than a second that separated them at the end, and I remember seeing them go pretty much side by side through 130R twice in wet conditions. I mean, fair play to both drivers for pulling that off. I mean, I think 130R is one of the great corners in Formula One, and if you get two cars side by side, it just makes it look even more awesome. And yeah, two incredibly talented drivers, and yeah, for whatever reason, Mercedes just didn't seem to have the pace compared to even Alpine. I mean, I think Alpine have had a quietly extremely good season, especially Ocon. I mean, they're fourth in the constructors now. They're ahead of McLaren by 13 points, and Ocon himself is eighth in the drivers' championship. Alonso with 65 points, Ocon 78 in both in eighth and ninth, and yeah, as Henry said, Gasly moving to Alpine, which we'll cover a bit more detail a bit later. But yeah, two incredibly talented young French drivers. And that youthfulness, I think they're going to make a good team. And yeah, I don't see why Alpine can't go from strength to strength and yeah, maybe challenge for that best of the rest spot, and potentially challenge if, say, Mercedes or Ferrari, Red Bull, if one of the big teams messes up a bit next year, then they could be challenging for podium positions and that third place in the constructors.
Now, if we thought one midfield battle was good, how about two F1 titans going at it side by side in Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso? Because battling for P6 and, 11 thousandths of a second between them. That's pretty.
I think it was a better battle than the Ocon Hamilton. As good as that was,
Definitely,
I think that was better. The quality of drive. You got to think these are both of them world championship winning drivers.
6 world championships between the two. 6.
And cars that are, I would say, kind of similar, but again, cars that weren't as good, and they're pushing both of them to their limit. Like they're both in almost the same spec car. It was just brilliant, and it's weird that Vettel sort of won that in the end. Being in a slightly worse car. Well, we're just talking about how good Alpine are at the moment. Probably a lot worse car, really, and just pushing it all to the limit. I think that, and the respect that they sort of have for each other, yet they're still fierce and aggressive, but yet still what I can't think of the word, just so cautious yet aggressive at the same time, if you know what I mean, like sort of racing, but still not wanting to take each other off, and keeping that thing just respectful racing. And I just think that was amazing from those two. And on and off the track, they're both quite similar. They've got that calm manner. They want to do well, and both great guys. And I'm happy that they got such a high place, and then especially Vettel with his final race is one of his favourite tracks, so he deserved that, and driver of the day, rightly so.
Now, Japan, Suzuka, full points, half points, what do you call it? Because if you don't race to its required laps, and you have red flags, green flags here and there, you kind of wonder, how many points are the drivers going to get? Are they going to get the full accredited points, or are they going to be slashed in half, 3/4, and it's another thing that came up in this race, which, I don't know. Do we know the answer to it? Should it happen in F1?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because, I mean, we look back to Spa last year, and they had 2 laps of racing in quote marks.
No,
I think
ladies and gentlemen, we waited 3 hours?
That was a long time, yeah.
To start.
I think, in any other circumstances, Spa would have just been cancelled, but because of time and conditions, they decided to keep trying, and that is allowed. But I think that the official ruling is you have to have at least 2 laps of green flag conditions, which Spa didn't have, and for some reason points were still awarded, albeit not full points, half points obviously. But it was weird because they got past the halfway mark in terms of distance and laps covered, and the race ended under green flag conditions. So as the rules stand at the moment, full points can be awarded. If they got to half race distance and it would have been red flagged and not resumed, then I think it would have been half points, or 3/4 points, or some sort of reduction in points. It's a bit of a weird one, because I think you can go racing for 2 hours within a 3-hour time limit or something. So I think the race started at 2:00 or something Japanese time, or just after 2, and then they had the delay for, I think it was over 2 hours, and then they got back running again at, I think it was about 4:15 local time. And then they had roughly 40 minutes left, so they essentially went racing for about just under 45 minutes. Which, I mean, if we look back to Singapore a couple of weeks ago, then I think if they raced for 45 minutes there, that would have been half points, because they wouldn't have reached half race distance. But it's a weird one, because I think technically if you get 5 minutes in at the end, you race for like 3 laps or something, then half points can be awarded if the race ends under green flag conditions, which, yeah, I mean, as said earlier about these grey areas in the FIA's rules at the moment, and yeah, I don't know how I sit with that, to be honest, because yeah, they went past half race distance, but there was a long gap, and they didn't complete 75, or they didn't get past the 75% threshold, which they need for 4 points, yet 4 points were awarded. And I remember watching the Channel 4 highlights back, and you had Alex Jacks on commentary with, I think it was about 3 minutes to go, saying, oh, those graphics you see on your screen awarding 4 points, they're not correct. But as it turns out, Jakes was wrong, and 4 points were awarded. But yeah, it's a weird one, and I suppose technically it was right to award 4 points, but yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that, given the race only went, yes, it was over halfway distance, but I think there should have been some sort of reduction in points, whether it's half points or 3/4. I'm not too sure, but yeah, it's one for the FIA to sort of ungrey, if you like, make more black and white, more concrete going into next year and season beyond.
Yeah, I'll continue on that and said that I've been looking at like reasons why, and I watched a YouTube video today actually that sort of explained it. So basically, in the FIA rules, Article 6.5, it said that the reduced points allocation applied to the event basically says that only half points or reduced points will be awarded if the race directors, i.e. the FIA, abruptly end the race in between that 3 hour period. So if it comes to a conclusion, whether that be the 2 hour timer or the 3 hour timer, as long as they've done over 2 laps, it will be full race points. So you can technically start 2 or 3 minutes before the 3 hour cutoff mark, do 2 racing laps and be awarded 4 points. It's a really weird loophole and, patch in the rules, but it's to make races, come to a conclusion and still have 4 points. So we basically, it's a bit of, we've been tricked to thinking that race points are only halved and whatever because of Spa last year. I think we're still thinking about that, but basically remember what happened in Spa is that the race was cut off by the race directors and the FIA. This race raced to a conclusion and it finished at the end of the 3 hour race window and not the 2 hour race time, because obviously they lined up in the end and one overtook the other and whatever, we know that. So that's the reason why 4 points were awarded. But because of Spa last year, F1 fans were going, oh, we're going to get this. And to be fair, the commentary team kept on updating us. I mean, I definitely tweeted that out. They said that the F1 commentary team kept on going, oh, we're at the point of 25%, oh, we're at the point of 50%, oh, we're at the point of 75%, oh, it'll be 75% points. So, Max Verstappen won't win. 5 minutes later, he's won it. It's confusing. Like you said, we need more clarity. We need it to be black and white. But it's just a weird loophole that somehow decided the championship. And if it was a few races ago, we probably would have thought, oh, okay, it's 4 points, whatever. But the fact that it's decided the championship is why we're thinking, FIA, sort your stuff out. Especially in a race where there were so many controversies as well, going along with just that. So yeah, mental race and a weird loophole and patch and plot hole or whatever you call it in the FIA ruling. So yeah, that's the reason why. If you don't understand it, there was a YouTube video. There's a YouTube video by Chain Bear. It's a really good one that explains like the whole situation. So yeah, check that out.
So it seems the FIA have a lot of homework to do in terms of how they make their rules, so that it can flow properly, and it's followed to the book. You know what I mean? Not adding stuff that's not in the book.
It was followed to the book. It's just that we didn't know that they were doing it to the book. We thought it was something else. So they have done it to the book. I'm not defending the FIA because I think they need to sort some stuff out, but they did do it to the book. Mm-hmm. It's just they did it too much to the book. We should have seen it differently to what it is in the book. So they need to almost, reinvent the wheel in a sense, because they need to sort it out so it's more clear for
what
us.
Book is? Which book are we on now?
Just any
how
book,
much?
just
How
a
much
book
book
that
is
has all
right?
the rules in. We don't know. But the thing is, I was going to say this before, but we moved on. They make the rules. They can break the rules. They're not laws. Like, with football, they're rules. In rugby, they're laws. If you do something bad in rugby, they're rugby laws. Football, the rules are meant to be broken. F1, they're rules. They're made to be broken. And who's the the person at the top and the society at the top that can change those rules? It's the FI themselves. So they can do what they want, really. I know they could be, especially because sports get so much more popular now. It's more people scrutinising them. But you know what? They can do what they want, and they will get backlash no matter what they do, I think. But it's part of the sport.
So a lot happened in Japan, and Max Verstappen became a two-time champion. But other than that, inside the race, we did get some things that you never thought had happened. Like, who would have thought we'd see a Schumacher on the top of the timesheets? That's right. Mick Schumacher was leading the race in Suzuka
for like half a second until Verstappen passed him again. But yeah, good to see.
It was dead quick, wasn't it? But yeah, it was. I saw someone on Twitter that printed out the graphic of when Schumacher was on the top and they framed it on the wall. So I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, when was the last time we saw Haas at the top, other than when they've been out first in a practice or qualifying session? I don't think we've seen that at all. So yeah, brilliant for Haas, but they were waiting on the safety car and it never came. So it's their fault that they dropped down quicker than a blooming.
And another thing, Nicholas Latifi, a man who is a quiet driver, if you like, does get himself in the occasional incidents or so, but he managed to get his first points in F1 this year, going from last to P9, meaning that all 20 drivers who have raced this season have got at least 1 point this season. It's great to see that Latifi's, in the top 10 because, he hasn't really had the best of racing in his career in F1. But it's nice to see that. Now, F1. In the world of F1, we've got other news for you. Drivers. It's always great to hear driver news. And, let's kick. I think we've got some tasty ones here. We've got Pierre Gasly going to Alpine next year for 2023. Now, I think that I'm very excited about because Gasly's a great driver. He's won a few races. And he's going to a team that can really push for best of midfield, if you like, or even try and sneak into the top 3 in the future, in years to come. And what do you make of the move for the team and for Gasly? Wes, let's start with you.
All right. I was wondering if he was going to start there. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good move. I suppose it was heavily rumoured, I think, where Gasly would be going, especially once Alonso left to join Aston Martin. And yeah, French driver, French car, French teammate. They're just going to make the car out of baguettes next season, I think, Alpine. Perhaps not.
I saw that tweet.
I think it's a very good move. Alpine, a team who have been sort of on the up a bit recently. I think they're a bit of a quiet team, a team that sort of quietly do well, as I mentioned a bit earlier on. They're 4th in the constructors at the moment, as I said, best of the rest. I don't see them beating Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull for that 3rd place in certainly the next sort of few years, but potentially 5-6 years down the line, maybe. If there's another regulation change, perhaps, who knows. I think Ocon, as mentioned earlier, is a quality driver. Pierre Gasly, yes, he has that race win under his belt. Well, both of them have got their race win under their belt. I think I saw their career stats are actually quite similar. They've both got a race win. They've both got pretty similar, within only like a couple of podiums of each other, a couple of race starts as well. I think the sort of the fresh start for Gasly will work quite well for him because he obviously started off with Toro Rosso quite a few years ago now. Was it 4 or 5 years? I think they changed to AlphaTauri in his second year or third season in F1. Obviously, went up to Red Bull when. Oh, who was it not doing very well? I can't remember now. It wasn't Kvyat. I can't remember. Someone left Red Bull and then Pierre Gasly
Was it
joined.
Hartley?
Or it might have been
Hartley.
It might have been when Ricciardo left Red Bull to join Renault. Gasly was promoted to Red Bull for a little bit, and then they brought Albon into Toro Rosso. And then obviously they did the switch around halfway through the season, and I suppose going back to AlphaTauri did Gasly some good, got him a bit more time to get used to F1, if you like. And but having said that, I don't really see him going anywhere in Red Bull at the moment, especially with obviously their golden boy Verstappen, and I think Perez is going to stick around for a few more years, and I think they're one of the best driver pairings on the grid. So I think a fresh start for Gasly will do him good, going to a new team, new engines, sort of whole different dynamic, if you like. There's no sister team, there's no junior team, big team, if you like, compared to Red Bull and AlphaTauri. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out for him, sort of the free of the shackles, if you like. We saw with Bottas moving to Alfa Romeo, and he's done pretty well for himself, I think. Sort of having that freedom to just be free, really, I suppose. No team orders, and no sort of Helmut Marko and Franz Tost sort of micromanaging your career, if you like, going from one team to the other within the space of a season. So I think it will be a good move, and hopefully he and Ocon can push Alpine to, as I said, solidify their position as best of the rest, and who knows, maybe challenge the big boys in a few years' time.
Henry, where do you think this move? What's the question? Where do you think the move helps the team in terms of reaching the constructors' standings?
Like we said, it's a young, fresh team. I know there's been rumours that they're not very good friends. I think that'll go out the window. Esteban seems happy that Pierre's joining. Pierre seems happy to be joining. I know he's sad to leave Yuki. I know they're good mates, but they'll still see each other week in, week out. They just won't be working as closely with each other anymore. But I was just looking up because you're saying they're both young drivers. I was like, I'm pretty sure they're the same age. They are. They're a few months apart from each other, so they're both 26. So yeah, they've got. If you think about Hamilton, 37 now, they've got 10 years in them yet. That's if nothing major happens or whatever, and I mean, probably at least 4 or 5 minimum for both of them. So they go from strength to strength. Like I said before, I know Wes was saying maybe not Mercedes caliber, but McLaren challenging them for that 4th place spot, I think can happen in the next year or two, and then 5-6 years planning. But I know we said that the Renault team we thought were going to be up there, but they never really got there, and they've changed to Alpine, and thinking, can they be that 4th best of the rest? And they really can prove themselves next season, I think. And I think they have taken the new the regulations quite well, unlike some teams. So yeah, I think they're going to go for the strength straight. Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, who were Racing Point, and they were good, and now they've just fallen back. Haas and Williams don't seem to be any better. Haas have had a little bit of an improvement, but just only one better than Williams probably.
But just on that, I think maybe Gasly's leaving AlphaTauri because they're 9th in the constructors at the moment. I think Haas have leapfrogged them. Yeah. They're level on points, but I'm not quite sure how Haas are ahead, because I don't think they've got better sort of race finishes than AlphaTauri. But quietly, it's been a poor season for AlphaTauri when a stellar one for Haas.
Because you think that I'm still yet to see anything from Yuki, but I know that Gasly is a very, very good driver. Got that race win last season, a really good one as well. Holding off Sainz for multiple laps and to win in Monza. Not an easy track to navigate a car like that around. So yeah, brilliant, and obviously a good track for that car. Winning a few years back, was it Vettel, the Toro Rosso as well? So yeah, it does seem a strange one that we see AlphaTauri as, middle of the road, but actually they really aren't doing that well this season. So yeah, almost jumping ship in a way. I think that Red Bull are putting a lot of money, maybe even too much money, into their own team. They're forgetting about the sister team. Was that a good segue? Was that good enough? Was that good enough?
Still got another driver move to get through yet.
The best, before we go on to we're going to talk about the next, I'm pretty sure. But the best tweet I've seen today is like, when it said Red Bull gives you wings, I didn't mean chicken wings. As I did go. Basically, I think they've just shifted. That when like the bar goes up, they said that the cost where they spent money on the car goes over. They've just swapped it for catering and said it was, we would have let the staff go hungry otherwise. But it's a good move. But
Yeah, I saw that.
They should be penalised. But yeah, we'll get on to that.
So, Yuki Tsunoda has a new teammate at AlphaTauri next year. His name is Nick de Vries, former Formula E champion with Mercedes EQ team. And Nick de Vries is the kind of character who, would you say, should have been in F1 a few years ago? Maybe should have been in F1 a few years ago, maybe before. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, potentially. I think he's got this seat largely off the back of his stand-in duty in Monza, where that was an unbelievable drive. I mean, the first time he had the odd testing session, but first full race in a Grand Prix car at Monza, pretty much the highest speed track on the calendar. To come away with 9th place, 2 points. I mean, the only driver not to score points this year is Nico Hülkenberg, technically, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a weird one for me, I think, because I mean, yes, de Vries should undoubtedly be on the grid, I think, but I didn't see him going to AlphaTauri. I didn't see him joining a Red Bull-based team when I think he tested with, I think it was first of all Mercedes early on this season, then he had a test with Aston Martin, and then the Grand Prix with Williams. So with a vacant seat at Williams with Latifi not on the grid next year,
it would have been ideal to go to
all bets are on de Vries sticking with his Mercedes roots, as you mentioned, Mercedes EQ Formula E champion, and going to Williams. But yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, but I think it should be a good one, because as we've seen, de Vries is a hugely talented driver, and he just needs to be on the grid, whether it's AlphaTauri, Williams, Haas, whoever. I'm just glad he's got a seat, but yeah, a bit of an odd choice, but he just wants to be in F1, and AlphaTauri's a good way into that.
Right. Before we move on to the cost cap with Red Bull, 2023, who finishes, right, a random race, Bahrain, for example, Gasly and Ocon, who finishes high in Bahrain?
Ocon, for me.
Henry?
Used to the team, used to the car.
Yeah, I think that would be the same reasoning for me. I think he's just going to be used to it. I know there'll be pre-season testing and whatever, but I think he's a better driver as well. I do like Gasly. I'm a big fan of Gasly, but over the two, it'd have to be Ocon. Just because of he knows the car better. There'll be the same regulations or whatever. So yeah, I'd say Ocon.
Looks like we're all going for Ocon then. If we were in Bahrain next year and everything, right? Well then, who out qualifies who more next year? Nick de Vries or Yuki Tsunoda?
That's a tough one.
From what we've seen, it's got to be de Vries, doesn't it? I mean, I know Latifi's raced for Williams for so long, and he beats him in one race. I think that's that. And I think Yuki, like I said before, Yuki's yet to prove himself. I haven't seen anything special from him yet. And this season, like you said, they're bottom, then the second from bottom in the constructors. I mean, it sort of speaks for itself in a way. I'm going to go De Vries. I'll go De Vries.
Now, Wes, you said it's a tough one. I remember the question is out qualified. So we're talking about qualifying.
Yeah, I can't remember how many times Tsunoda's out-qualified Gasly, but it can't be that many. Yeah, having said that, I think Tsunoda will... I think it'll be close between them, but I think Tsunoda will just have the edge, just because, as I mentioned earlier, just that familiarity with the car and the team, and for De Vries to go from pretty much Mercedes his whole life into Red Bull and AlphaTauri is... I know at a certain level all the cars are the same, but there's certain things that are slightly different and way things work, and yeah, I think Tsunoda will just have the edge. But yeah, I think it could be interesting, because I think on paper, I think De Vries has potentially got more talent than Tsunoda, but yeah, they're, as we said with Ocon and Gasly, they're both young drivers. They're both extremely talented, and yeah, I think it'll be very close to see who out qualifies who, and the points come roughly this time next year.
Honestly, I'll be very interested to see that qualifying between the two AlphaTauri drivers. Who knows? Maybe Nick De Vries might, produce something like never before. Anyway,
win the championship. No,
I didn't mean like that. But hey,
anything can happen.
Anything can happen in F1. Right. Last topic of the evening, cost cap. Over the last few days, F1 Twitter, the FIA, it's been all about the cost cap. How much money does each team get for the season? How much budget we're getting? How you spend your money may just define your season. And when you have a budget, the whole essence of it is to, not spend more than your means, right? And if you do, there's going to be implications. And like we saw on yesterday, Red Bull and Aston Martin, as the two teams revealed, fell short of the F1 budget.
Or went over it, more likely.
Or went over it.
Yeah, they fell short. Yeah, they would have over. They fell short. They went over it, didn't they? Well, I think Aston was it Aston Martin procedural something?
Procedural. That's what they.
I think that means that they didn't show the right funds. That's what I've got from that. Whereas Red Bull have spent over, because initially it was like Aston Martin were in the 5%. The rumoured that Aston Martin were in the 5%, and Red Bull were over the 5%, and then Williams have done something, but I think that's irrelevant. But then it's sort of like they both came down a category. So Red Bull went into with Aston Martin within 5%, and then Aston Martin went down to where, it was just sort of like they didn't really prove the funds correctly. That's what I gathered from that. I don't think they've gone over. They think they almost did, and they didn't want to show that they almost did, I think.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what it means really, but
yeah,
is it going to have any implications on Aston Martin at the end of the day? Maybe a reprimand, and that's it. I don't really see them being fined or point stopped or whatever. And yeah, Williams
slap on the wrist onto what?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, having said that, Williams Williams were fined $25,000 in June for a procedural breach back in May, which they then obviously rectified. But yeah, Red Bull, 5% minor overspend breach or whatever it's called, but it's spending 5% more than the budget, which is I think it's £142 million, something.
100, yeah, something like that.
So yeah, that 5% I think equates to roughly 7 million, if my maths is right. Could be completely wrong.
It's 145 million, which will go down to 140 next season, because it's going down by 5 million every season until they find a good even match, because obviously they're trying to get the teams closer together. Yeah, so it's about 7 point something million.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some sort of serious punishment, because I mean, 8 of the 10 teams fully complied with the regulations and the cost cap rules. Were within budget.
Even Haas.
Haas I don't think Haas would have been much of an issue because they
I
wouldn't
don't think they
have
have the
anywhere
money.
near
I
as-
don't think
yeah,
they
wouldn't
have
have
the
the
money.
money.
True.
That's why the cost caps are coming down to make those teams at the bottom closer together to the ones at the top. It's. I think you've got to put props onto Mercedes for the last season. I know Ferrari obviously said that they were saving their money up for the following seasons, but I think you've got to take your hats off to Mercedes because I think they could have, if they wanted, if there wasn't the cost cap, I think they would have spent loads and loads and loads more. The reason the cost cap's what it is and why it's coming down to put the teams closer together. So, yeah, I don't think the likes of Haas and Williams have that money.
Yeah.
But
True.
it shows on the track. I mean, apparently Aston Martin have. They obviously haven't done much with it.
I know.
But
What have they overspent on? It's not showing any
And
What could
it's
results.
they,
like-
what could they possibly
Yeah.
done with their money?
and all the reserve money that's, and obviously maybe more, maybe it was put aside for AlphaTauri. They've moved it over to Red Bull. You just don't know. That's why they're not doing that well this season. So yeah, but I don't think, like I said, I don't think Aston Martin have done anything wrong. I think they just didn't prove the funds correctly. It's the Red Bull thing, and you know, if we're talking about controversial ends to a season, could he get it stripped from him? And will Lewis even want it? That's the other issue. Will Lewis even want it? Is another matter. But it's weird because it's going to always this one. You know, this season he's won it well so far because the money might come out for this season and they might be over again. But there's always going to be a star next to Max Verstappen's name, I think, for last season's title because there's just so many controversies around it. But yeah, it's just unacceptable, really.
Yeah, I think WTF1 did a video on it, and I think for a minor breach, they said the potential punishments were deduction of drivers and constructors points, whether that's this year or retrospectively added, if that makes sense, to last year, deducted from last year. Suspension from one or more stages of a competition, like missing a race or qualifying, or limitations on aerodynamic and other testing, and a further reduction of the cost cap for next season, which I think probably looks like the most likely or the most sensible thing to do. Yeah, either way, whatever happens, Red Bull need to be punished for this, and I think the FIA, sorry, and F1 possibly need to make a bit of an example of this of Red Bull to show what could happen if you do break those rules. Those rules are in place for a reason. It's to bring the teams closer together, to make the racing more interesting and engaging, and to make it more of a level playing field. And yes, you are still going to have that disparity at the end of the day with the big boys, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, spending more money than your Haas and your Williams. But you want to see more even racing, and I think this year has done that with the regulations and the introduction of that cost cap. But yeah, whether, as we mentioned, whether it's going to retrospectively impact the 2021 season, whether that's drivers' points, constructors' points. I mean, there's already enough controversy about last year as it is, without this added onto it as well. But yeah, I mean, if they deduct points for this season, I don't think it's going to have too much impact on it. Max is, in terms of the driver standings, well in front. Even if they deduct 100 points from him, he's still quite comfortably in the lead. I think there's like a 260 point gap or something in the constructors between Red Bull and Ferrari. So again, not much is really going to be impacted there. But yeah, whatever happens, I don't really want to see a fine, because Red Bull can just pay that pocket money for them, basically, a fine, even if it's millions of pounds. Yeah, something, whether they get suspended for a race or two, or further reduction of the cost cap for next year, I think would be the sensible way to go. But yeah, some sort of example needs to be made, and so you can say, oh, it's only a 5% overspend, but that's still millions of pounds at the end of the day. It's more than Williams and Haas will spend on certain things throughout the course of the year. So yeah, they need to be punished, and punished severely.
Yeah, like you said, Wes, there needs to be an example shown here, because if it's not a big punishment, other teams might think, oh, let's give that a go, and we get certain things taken off us. I mean, Red Bull won last season; they're going to win this season. Like you said, they've taken 100 points off. They've still won this season and last season. I mean, that's the thing. And so other teams might think, oh, let's overspend, win the championship, and then next season we just pay the forfeit for that following season and go from there. So I think what was the one that was a good one? I mean, the fine, yeah, like you said, pocket money was all right. I saw a good idea, but then it was he sort of like shot it down as well. It was a guy called Tomo on YouTube was saying that they had like it was called something like a ballista, which is like an extra weight to the car.
Yeah, ballast.
So by how much you've done, like what the level is, you get a certain weight added to your car. So it will obviously slow down the car. So no team would want that because obviously, you know, in this sport, I suppose, if you look at the qualifying for Suzuka, there was not much space between any teams. You had a weight to the car that could send you right back to the back. So yeah, I think that they have to be made an example of. But you know, going, you know, we're going to strip that title from you. It ruins that moment of we'll always look back at that and go, you know, that wasn't right. I think it just it has to happen now. It's happened. It's in the past. You can't really change it. But yeah, maybe next season. That was the one. Next season they get something. They get the cost cap reduced further for them. But then you think other teams might go, oh yeah, we'll do that, and then next season we'll get reduced one. But then you know the following season will be all right, and then do that again. And so you need something that shows an example that they can't be exploited and loopholed. That will deter other teams from doing it. So yeah, I think that maybe, you know, instead of 114 million next season, their cost cap is 135 or 130 or something like that, which is still a lot of money, but it does, you know, hinder them slightly.
So a lot has happened in this episode, or I should say the last episode and a bit, really. We've had wet racing, a lone tractor disturbing, you know, on track racing, and Max Verstappen has become yet another world champion again, 2-time, to the max. Yeah, what a hashtag! Not really a fan of it. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you guys on tonight's episode. So hope you've enjoyed it, and to all our viewers, hope you've enjoyed this episode as well. And it's almost just a week until we go racing again in COTA, the USA, Austin. But then next season, well, I'm not even going to talk about next season now. We've still got 5 races to go this
Let's
season.
just enjoy I said this on the tweet out. Let's just enjoy these last few races because we've got 4 left until the long winter break. But not one.
Yeah.
Do you know what we say? Long winter break. It's quite a short one because we start quite early next season. Because 24 races.
Whew.
24? Is it 24? 23?
I
24?
think so, yeah.
24 races.
My word. Anyway,
It's going to be a long
that's a
one.
discussion for another video.
Yeah, that's time for another episode. So please do not forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram. You can also email us at f1stopshow@gmail.com. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. I've been your host, Sam Oni, and it's a goodbye from me. Bye-bye. And it's a goodbye from Wes.
Bye-bye.
And Henry Buxton.
See ya. Stay safe.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've only got a week until we arrive in America for the, USA Grand Prix. Number 2, I believe. Number 2? Yeah, number 2. Well, ladies and gentlemen, bye-bye.